Hello, and now I'm going to do a little video on heaven and hell. Just a collection of ideas and insights really that I've picked up from scripture and from here and there. So, as I say, first the bad news and later the good news. Hell is described as a fiery furnace in Matthew 13:42, as darkness in Matthew 8:12, as a perpetual fire and an undying worm in Mark 9:48. Obviously, these can't all be true because you don't have worms living in fires, and fires create light, so there isn't darkness where there are fires. So obviously not all of these descriptions taken from the New Testament can be true, and it's my feeling that none of them is intended as totally literal, but that they are, let's look here, they are chosen as vivid symbols of the very real torments of hell. C.S. Lewis, in his book The Great Divorce, depicts a variety of characters in a sort of pre-hell. Obviously, he didn't intend his book to be any sort of literal description, but his psychology is spot on as he shows the minds of people who reject God. Another book along similar lines is Huis Clos by Jean-Paul Sartre, translated into English as No Exit. Three characters are shut in a room with each other and locked in a perpetual battle of hate and fear. In fact, the doors of the room are not locked, but they are psychologically unable to escape from their destructive relationships. And this description is from Keith Ward's book. Movies have the issue of what to do with the bad guys at the end. The 2010 Disney movie Alice in Wonderland, they've got the Red Queen and the Knave to dispose of somehow at the end. I think their solution is quite clever and sure to be approved of by most people's sense of justice. They are banished to the Outlands, chained together. The Knave tries to kill the Queen, and when he's stopped from doing this, he begs to be killed himself. As they're dragged off, the Red Queen screams, "He tried to kill me! He tried to kill me!" So I think in the same way, hell, as depicted in the Bible, is a place that everyone will ultimately agree with the justice of, and it will be found that, as in Sartre's book, the people have sent themselves there and they're really keeping themselves there. There is also God's decree, but the people are keeping themselves there as well. And in company with each other, they face a rather grim prospect. Some Christians, even evangelicals, object to the idea of hell. Everlasting torment is intolerable from a moral point of view because it makes God into a bloodthirsty monster who maintains an everlasting Auschwitz for victims whom he does not even allow to die. So people like Pinnock instead promote the idea of annihilationism, that the evil person simply ceases to exist. But is annihilation really any more tolerable? Philip Larkin, in his poem Obad, says, "Nothing more terrible, the sure extinction that we travel to and should be lost in always, not to be here, not to be anywhere, and soon. Nothing more terrible, nothing more true." So let's not linger there, and let's come to heaven, a place where the wicked cease from troubling you with talk of their personal affairs, and the good listen with attention while you expound your own. So said Ambrose Bierce. Well, yeah. Adrian Plass writes in one of his books how he had doubts that heaven really was a place where he wanted to go to. It sounded rather boring. Then a friend, I think it was a Catholic priest, asked him What thing could you imagine doing that would give you the greatest pleasure and satisfaction? Adrian replied, as a true Englishman, scoring 100 against Australia at Lord's. Well, heaven will be as good as that and better, his friend said, and from then on Adrian had a much more positive attitude towards the prospect of heaven. Oscar McKerras, in his book A Brief History of Heaven, is a bit more serious. He considers the different images of heaven and paradise that people have had. The walled garden was a popular one in the Middle Ages. In Paradise Lost, Milton's description inspired the English gentry when modelling their great country estates, and it contains the famous line, "Flowers of all hue, and without thorn, the rose." McKerras says, a garden melds the glories and raw splendour of nature with the symmetry and precision of human enterprise. Dante's description of paradise is a little different. It's inspired by the great pine forest of Chiayi. What image speaks best to you? Recently I saw a picture of a beautiful beach scene, a flowering putukara tree that we are native of New Zealand here, cast its cool shade onto a pure white beach, blue sea stretched to the horizon. It made me nostalgic for the holidays I used to enjoy as a boy on the beaches of Auckland. All the pleasant associations make this for me the most appealing representation of heaven. But I think the reality will turn out better than any of these pictures. Any of them, all of them put together. Another foreshadowing of heaven, in my view, is the massed choir, stretching as far as the eyes can see, like the himene of Tahiti. Words have never succeeded in conveying the impression made by this music. Some have said that it's like an ocean wave coming in with growing strength as the voices increased in intensity, breaking and rolling and bounding, and then dying down and disappearing in a long sustained notes. The women's voices carried the melody while the men provided deep rhythmic counterpoint, one of them with a great voice sometimes throwing out cries and appeals. All the people rocked back and forth as they sang, many with their eyes shut, entirely lost in the music. And here's a poem by Cristina Georgina Rossetti. Once in a dream I saw the flowers that bud and bloom in paradise. More fair they are than waking eyes have seen in all this world of ours. And faint the perfume-bearing rose, and faint the lily on its stem, and faint the perfect violet compared with them. Fact is, of course, that we don't really know what heaven will be like, although I'm sure all of these things give us pretty good hints. Yet it's as hard for us to imagine what it must be like as it is for an unborn baby still in the womb to imagine what the world outside is like. Just imagine if there were twins in a womb and one of them went out and saw and then came back into the womb and tried to describe to his twin what the outside world was like. How could he describe sounds, music, smells, vision, color? How could he describe it? He could only use the words that they understood in their little, very restricted world, and those words would only give hints and faint suggestions of what the outside world is really like. And so I think that's what we're like in this troubled, flawed, deeply flawed world, trying to think, trying to conceive, trying to describe what heaven is like, might be like. Perhaps the best way to encapsulate it would be Milton's words, "Without thorn the rose." This shows that we can see heaven on earth, for example in a rose, but on earth there is always some lack and always something to spoil it. in heaven there won't be. And Milton's beautiful succinct phrase catches it. Without thorn, the rose.